Yo, so I just want to make this video to explain something that's super important. Like, really, really pay attention to this. And this is like what I call the phases of business, right? You need to know this and you need to be conscious of this because otherwise you're always just going to be feeling stuck in your business. And so this is arguably one of the most important key concepts you could actually learn as a business owner. And when I learned this, it just changed the game. And I was like, oh, that's what it's meant. That's what I'm meant to do. Oh, okay, I understand. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm going through. Okay, this makes sense, right? So that being said, right, this is what I call the evolution phases of business, right? So let me just pull this doc up quickly and just walk you through what exactly this is and really, really fucking pay attention. Like seriously fucking pay attention, right? So this is a little graph I made, right? Um, now the evolution phases of business, right? So let's just say you run a OF management agency, okay? Then this is where you're going to start, right? So everyone starts, like when you start a business, right? Everyone starts in the doing it phase, right? So when you're getting started, this is evolution phase one, right? And these are the three of the phases we go through: doing it, teaching it, managing it, right? But we're going to go through like this whole process, and a lot of you guys might be in evolution phase one, right? And that is, it's going to go from you doing it yourself. So everyone that's watching this video right now, who's saying, yeah, I'm doing it myself right now. You know, I'm the main salesperson, I'm the main chatter, I'm the main content creation person, main marketer, the main admin person. Good, right? Because that's what you should be doing, especially if this is your first business, right? And so you're going to go from doing it, right? You're going to prove that process, and then you're going to go to teaching it, right? And that's when you're going to kind of like optimize your teachings and systemize it, and then you're going to start managing it, right? And then, accountable expectations, right? So let me give you an example, right? So this is super key. As you're doing it, as you're in the doing it phase, which a lot of you are in right now, you're doing everything, which is good. Okay. You need to know and understand how to do everything. And it's going to hurt like shit and it's going to be super volatile and you're going to be, right. In this doing it phase, you want to be building assets so you can get to the point where it feels good and is stable and you've proved the process. So let's just take this example. We're going to use this example for the rest of the video just to show you exactly what I mean, right? And we're going to use outreach, right? So let's just say your main client acquisition strategy is cold outbound, right? Cold outreach. You're going to be doing it yourself to start. You're going to figure out how to do it. And great, it hurts because you're doing it yourself and it's high effort, low impact. And so it hurts like shit because you should be focusing on creating content. You should be focusing on all these other high leverage activities. But if you don't do outreach, no clients come and no one pays the bills. And so arguably it's important, but it hurts like shit and it's volatile because there's no consistent lead flow. Because some days you might only send 30, some days you might send 100, some days you might not do any at all because there's all these things you're doing and business is a mess, right? And so what you should be doing when you're in the doing it phase of every aspect of your business, chatting, all these things, right? But we're just going to use outreach as the example. When you're doing outreach yourself, you need to get to the point where you're building assets and proving that process, right? So in the doing it phase, you're going to eventually get to a point of doing it where it starts to work and you start to learn and understand outreach and you start to get clients coming in and you understand the flow and you understand the message framework of what you're saying and how you get them on a call, right? And you're going to start to prove that process and it's going to start to work, right? And at that point, it's going to start to feel good because it's working. You've proved the process. You now know you do these things on outreach and it works and you get a client as a result, right? The biggest issue here is at this stage, people are like, right, I've done it, I've proved it, this works. I'm gonna hire someone to do it for me, and I'm gonna go to managing them. And they jump from doing it to managing it, and that's where it all crumbles. And you either burn out or you have to try again, right? And so when you start to prove that process of outreach and it starts to work, your business starts to feel good, it starts to get stable, and you start to hit a flow, right? You hit this flow. So it's all volatile, you're doing it yourself, you haven't quite figured it out, and you're starting to figure it out, and it's all volatile. And then you prove the process. This is the process that works, that guarantees I get clients, and you hit a flow, right? Great. Now, when you get to this point and you've proved the process, you gotta then go to teaching it. Otherwise, you just get stuck in this phase forever and you never scale or grow, right? And so this is the biggest issue that a lot of people make is, firstly, if they do jump to teaching it, they don't actually know how to teach what they've done because they've been doing outreach themselves for the last 3 months and they've not actually been building or documenting anything and they haven't been building any assets. So this is the most important part of the doing it phase. When you're in the doing it phase, you need to be building assets. So what I mean by that is when you're doing outreach, you need to be documenting what you're doing, what has worked and what hasn't worked. And you want to be making looms and Google Docs and all these things. You want to get as much data as possible. You want to track everything. You want to get as much data. You want to build as much assets. So when you do eventually hire someone to do outreach for you, you can just be like, boom, here's the play, right? This is everything that worked for me and everything that didn't work. So just copy this, right? And you've got an asset, you've built up a war chest. So, for example, you made a loom on your top 5 conversation and you've reviewed your top 5 conversations and you've explained your thought process as to why you said this and when they said that, why you said this and why you went for this way. And you explain the framework so you can just pass it on to the person you hire. If you don't do that, then you're going to get to the point where you hire someone, you're going to be like, fuck, I forgot everything I did that worked. And how do I even teach this person how to do it? I don't even know. And then you're just going to get stuck in this phase, right? Now, something else to be conscious of. Once you're doing it yourself and you've proved that process and you go to teaching it, the reason it's mainly going to hurt like shit, even when you build assets and you give them the play, is purely because no one's going to be able to do it as good as you. No one cares as much as your business as much as you do, and they're just not gonna be as good as you. And so the biggest mistake people have when hiring is they jump from doing it to managing it because they hire someone that does outreach. They look for a specific person that does outreach, so they just assume they should be good at outreach because that's what they're hiring for. But they don't understand that they actually need to teach them their way and their process and their system and teach them about their client avatar and the person they're speaking to and the prospect, and they have to get really in deep, right? And so they hire someone and they're like, yeah, cool, I'm just going to now manage this person. You go run the play. You're meant to be good at outreach. Use all the assets. Good luck, right? It never works. And so it just stays volatile, right? And that's why, yeah, okay, you have to build the assets, you have to give them the process, you have to explain, but you have to pour into each employee. Every person you hire, you need to pour into them. Like for the first 2 weeks, you should be jumping on calls with them every single day, reviewing what they're doing, giving them rapid, iterative feedback on everything they're doing, and really pouring into them as much as you possibly can to make them good. During this phase of the teaching phase, your business is going to start to hurt, right? That's just how it is. You can't go from doing it to just fucking managing and everything's great. You have to go from doing it to teaching it. And in that teaching phase, the business is going to start to hurt and it's going to start to get all volatile again. So let's just say, you're doing outreach, it starts to feel good because you proved it and it's working for you. There's going to be a time where you have to stop doing outreach. Even though you're good in this working, if you want to scale, you have to go focus on higher leverage stuff. So you have to hire someone. When you hire someone, it's going to start to hurt like shit because they're not going to perform as good as you. And that's where most people then fire that person and go back to doing it themselves because it was working when they was doing it. But then you can't scale. So then you just get stuck at this flow forever, right? And so if let's just say this flow is 10 grand a month, right? And you're doing it yourself and it's good, cool. But to get to 50 grand a month, you might have to drop to 5K a month and you might have to lose some, like you might have to like go in the shit for a bit, right? To get to the next flow. And so when you're teaching it, they're not going to be as good as you to start. So that first month or those first 2 weeks, let's just say when you were doing it yourself, you were setting 20 appointments a month. Well, when you bring someone on a teacher, they might set 5 or they might set 10. So therefore you're going to get volatile again. It's going to start to hurt. You've got to go through that phase to get to the next part where it feels good and it's stable again. And so when you do that, you start to optimize and systemize this person's working. You start to build out SOPs. You start to build out their working kits of exactly what they need to do. And that one person you hired, you should always hire with the mindset of hire 1 to hire 10. So that first outreacher that you hired should be good enough and should be the superstar to then he's going to be the one that goes and builds out that cold outbound team. So you don't have to touch it. And that's when you optimize and systemize it. This is how you onboard the outreachers. This is everything they need to go through. These are their onboarding tasks. This is everything they need to do, right? And so that way, that first outreacher you've hired, that is now his division. You don't have to bother with it again. You can obviously keep it. You obviously don't just neglect them, but that guy is now in charge of outreach. He's going to be doing outreach himself, and that guy is then going to go through this process, right? So that guy, when you start to scale your outbound team, he's going to go from doing it himself because you've told him, but then he's going to go to teaching, hiring new people and teaching them. And then he's going to go to managing it, right? And so it's the same process for all the executives in your agency. So at every part of your business, your first like good superstar chatter, you shouldn't be hiring new chatters. You shouldn't be hiring new outreach people. You shouldn't be hiring creative directors. You shouldn't be doing any of that stuff once you start to build and scale, right? You should hire one to hire 10. And the person that are in charge of those divisions is going to do that for you. So it's not just you that's going to go through this process, but your executives are going to go through this process as well, right? And so that's fine. And so we're going to stick with this outreach example. So cool, the guy is now doing outreach. You've optimized it, you've systemized it, it's great. And now it starts to feel good and stable again. And now you're at 50 grand a month, right? Now, this is where you remove yourself from this position to where you're not even going to be like teaching this person anymore because it's optimized and systemized. And now you're going to start managing them, right? And that's where you start to remove yourself from the business and you just start to manage people, right? And so that's when it starts to hit different again. And that's when it starts to get volatile because now you're gone from teaching it and you've proved the process and it works, but now you've got to go to managing those teams. And that's a different skill in itself. And it's going to hurt and it's going to get volatile, right? And at this point, you might realize I don't like managing it. And so if you're not the manager, you need to go and find that manager and you can just be the maker, right? And so this is where it starts to hurt again. And so at this point, then once you've figured out how you manage it, how you structure your team, how you structure your organization, how you build your hats, how you do everything, how you build your operations, how you build your systems, how you do your SOPs, how you do your policies, and you start to build this organization, you start to manage it, and you figure that out, then gets to accountable expectations, right? And so at that point you see success. But if you don't do this and you don't go through this phase, or you go from doing it to managing it, right? Or you go from doing it to teaching it back to doing it because the person you hired isn't doing as good as you, which is never going to be the case, then you either burn out or you have to try again, right? And so that is the evolution phases of a business, right? Phase one, doing it. Phase two, teaching it. Phase three, managing it, right? And so that's what you should look to do. And you just repeat this cycle, right? And executives in your organization repeat this cycle. And this is the evolution phases of a business, right? And so I thought it was like super important for you guys to understand that this is what it's meant to be. You're meant to do it yourself and it's going to hurt like shit until you prove something that works and then it starts to feel good and stable. Then you've got to find someone to teach them that because it doesn't make sense for you to do it anymore because it's low leverage and then it starts to hurt and get volatile again. But then you optimize and systemize that so it becomes easy. You now know how to teach it. You now have assets. You have a war chest. You have a training. Maybe you've built out a module and a training program for them to go through. Because like when you teach that first person, you should record and document all that as well, right? And so like when the next hire comes on, you've got all the recordings, you've got everything you taught that person, so you don't have to spend time teaching it. So when I hire Satis, for example, the first set that I ever hired, I recorded all the Zoom calls we had where I was teaching them about the product, teaching them about the prospect, teaching them about the workflow, the framework, the script, all that. I recorded all of it. So when I hired my next round of setters, I just give them it all so I didn't have to spend my time doing it again, right? And that's when I optimized and systemized it, right? I had their onboarding kits, I had their working kits, and that's when it starts to feel good again. Stuff's great, you're scaling, and it's stable, right? But then you go eventually go to managing it, and then it starts to hurt again, and then accountable expectations, and then you see success. So that is literally the evolution phases of business. And so this is something that you need to go through. If you try and skip these phases, it's not going to go well for you. And the only result, there's only two results, and that's either burning out or trying again, right? So that is pretty much the most important thing. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to add in here. I think I've covered it all. But yeah, if you don't get this phase right and you skip a bunch of stuff, then you're either gonna have to try again, and you're gonna have to restart and go back to go, or you're gonna burn out, right? So those are the only two things. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Just seeing if there's anything else I can think of. Yeah, but yeah, this is just always gonna happen. These are the phases. These are the phases, and yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it. There's nothing else you can really do. It's just obviously when you are when you are obviously starting the business, like during this phase one, you are responsible. This is something else actually. This is I forgot to add. During this phase one, right? When you're doing it, you are responsible for pretty much everything, right? You'll be leading from the front of the line and primarily teaching your team by showing them how it's done and building assets as you go. And with the right plan in place, you can get through this stage pretty quickly while building momentum to launch yourself and team into the next evolution phase. So literally at the start, you're going to be building and optimizing assets, training the team, driving sales and revenue, setting expectations, accountability, recruiting, hiring, firing, right? You're going to be responsible for pretty much everything. And so that is like the doing it phase. And so if you're there, just know that and be aware of that and be conscious. And done like this is the issue. A lot of people listen to like business gurus that are way far ahead of them, like people that are doing 500 grand a month, like myself. And they're like, oh, I should just jump to that point where Dylan's at, where he doesn't really do anything and he just takes calls on Monday and the rest of his week's completely free. I need to jump there. And so that's when they jump too fast. But I've been through this stage and you have to go through this stage. Otherwise, you're just going to burn out or you're going to have to try again. So this is the reason why most people don't have success. It's because they're not conscious of this. They don't understand what this is and what this process is. So this is honestly probably the most valuable video I've ever created, because if you don't understand this and you don't conceptualize or you don't see what this is, you're just always going to go through life guessing. Like, should I be scaling now? Should I be hiring? Now you know the path. Like this video alone is worth fuck tons of money. Like this took me 6 years to figure out until I like finally conceptualized it. And I was like, oh, and I got this from a mentor. And then I was like, oh my God, this makes sense. Like if I'd known this, I probably could have cut my fucking time in half, because the amount of times I went from doing it to teaching it and then realizing the person's not as good as me and then back to doing it. And so I could never scale. Oh my God, the amount of times I did that. Or then I would go from doing it to hiring someone, expecting them to just be amazing and trying to manage them, and then trying again or burning out and constantly churning through staff. And bro, being conscious of this will save you years of your life. So um yeah, you're welcome. Bye.